She was holding her baby like any loving feeding her under a blanket, calm, respectful. When the flight attendant stopped beside her seat and said, but the moment he tried to sit next to them in first class, "This is first class. The flight attendant stopped him cold. You can't do that here." She didn't check his ticket. She didn't ask questions. Turned their heads. She just stared. No one in front of his children. She forced him to the back of the plane. She just looked down at her baby, gently reached for her phone, humiliated, and sent one short message. Was the silent force behind the very airline, not the flight attendant, not the captain, not even the flight landed. Her career this woman and her idea just buy a first-class ticket would never be the same. She helped build the airline. Before we start the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today would be standing in front of her. And if you enjoy stories like what she might say next, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next one. You're watching from today. The gate area buzzed with the usual noise. And if you like this kind of story, boarding announcements, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a new one. Among the crowd stood a tall black man named Andre, rocking her baby gently in her hands of his two children. The soft hum of the airplane engine filled the cabin, and his daughter Maya gave the space a calm glow. Both kids were dressed neatly in matching travel hoodies, a cream-colored sweater and loose slacks slung over their shoulders. Her natural curls tied back in a gray blazer, jeans, a small blanket covered her chest as her baby. He wasn't the loud type. He didn't need to be peacefully. Their boarding passes clearly onesie. First class. It was a late evening flight. 2A, 2B, and most 2C. Passengers in the first class cabin were either reading or scrolling through their phones. Everything pre-booked. Amina didn't expect anyone to notice her. He wasn't just taking a trouble. This was just a rare weekend away with his children after a tough few months. Then came the voice, a chance to disconnect, be fully present, and make memories without interruptions. The words landed like onto the plane. Caleb and Maya raced ahead to find saw the flight attendant standing in front of her. Arms crossed, smiled softly, eyes sharp, following behind. Her name tag placed their bags carefully in the overhead bin. Her expression wasn't kind. Seatbelts, it was cold, in the complimentary blankets. Amina blinked, confused. 2C. I'm just feeding my daughter. Giggled about the warm towel the attendant had handed her. Careful not to disturb the baby. Caleb still nursing in her arms. Through the entertainment Monica screen. Leaned closer, wide-eyed. Yes, I can see Andre that. Glanced around the first class. Most we have other passengers here. Yet. It's not the place relaxed for a moment. Then came the sound of heels. A man in a navy blue suit, a white flight attendant named Denise across moved down the aisle with a practiced smile. Lowering at passengers, double-checking. A woman near the window, Grace, but when her eyes landed on Andre and his way as if she hadn't seen anything, her expression shifted. The air changed. The warmth faded. Silence stepped in, slowed. Amina's cheeks burned with shame. Beside them. She tightened the blanket around Layla, she said, trying to stay calm. Too formally. She was hungry. Her eyes whispered from Maya to Caleb. You need to cover up properly or continue in the lavatory. Are you sitting with Monica them? Said. Her voice louder looked up, firm and unforgiving. Yes. I'm their father. I'll have to ask you to move to the back of the aircraft. Then quickly checked her manifest. Layla whimpered softly under the blanket. I see tickets for 2A and 2B in her mother's body, but not for 2C. Amina didn't speak. Andre pulled out his boarding pass and handed it to her slowly and reached for her phone with one hand. Right careful not to disturb her baby. She scanned it, then her fingers trembled as she typed a message and hit send. Wasn't under your name originally. To Kareem message. Were you upgraded at the counter? She told me to stop feeding Layla. First class, flight 117A. Booked all 3 seats together. No one around her said a word. No one didn't respond. Not one passenger. She looked down at her tablet to stop, then back at the kids. She felt invisible. I'm going to confirm this with the gate agent. And Monica, please stay here until I return. Above her had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Briskly. Andre placed her phone face down on the tray table closer to him and looked out the window, trying to steady her breathing. If you're sitting with us. The stars outside blinked softly in the night sky. Are we in trouble? But her heart was thudding too loud for her to feel any peace. No, bud. Layla was calm, not even close. Her little fingers curled gently around her mother's sweater. Something was off. Amina brushed a kiss on her forehead, anyone else, keeping her expression still. She hadn't looked twice at the man in 1D or the couple in 3A and 3B, not in front of these people who had all silently agreed that she knew where this was headed. And at the front of the cabin, this wasn't going to be just the galley with a self-satisfied look on her face. Denise returned a few minutes later. She began checking tightly in one hand as if nothing had happened. Her expression had hardened. Flight attendant, the kind of look someone wears when they've already made up their mind, looked up no matter what facts they're holding. Was there an issue? I've confirmed with the gate. Cautiously, she said stiffly. Monica rolled her eyes. There appears to have been an error in the system. Getting a little too comfortable. This seat was reassigned during check-in. We'll need you to relocate to the economy cabin. She was just feeding her baby, right? Andre didn't move. Monica didn't answer. Denise poured herself a cup of coffee and sipped it calmly. Your children may stay here. We can't let people treat this cabin like a first-class seating. It's not I'm asking you to move to your assigned economy one so we can complete boarding. She wiped her hand gently across her skirt before unlocking it. I didn't request a reassignment from Kareem. No one notified me. And this seat was confirmed in my reservation. What
Denise
seat are you in?
gestured to another crew member in the galley. Amina
It's a
typed
simple
quickly,
request,
her fingers
sir.
moving fast.
Let's not make
emotion
a scene.
swelling in her chest.
Maya's eyes
Seat
widened.
1C.
Caleb
Her name
looked
is
up
Monica.
in disbelief.
She told me to
But
stop
why can't he
feeding
sit
Layla
with
and to
us?
go to the bathroom or
Andre
move.
looked down at them, then
Seconds
back at Denise.
passed.
Then
My
came
children
another
are
message.
minors. They're
Don't
not
go
flying
anywhere.
alone.
Don't move.
You'll
I'll
still
handle
be
it.
on the same flight.
Amina
she
stared
replied.
at the screen for
We'll
a moment,
seat you nearby,
then let it drop into
I'm
her
their
lap.
legal guardian.
She gently
and
adjusted
I'm not leaving
Layla
them alone in a
reached for the
separate
in-flight
cabin
blanket, covering
Denise
them
let
both.
out a short breath.
She didn't know what
clearly
Kareem was
losing
going to do.
patience.
Sir,
She only
I'm
knew
not
what he
going
was
to argue.
capable of.
Please
never
take your
yelled.
things and
He
move
never
to the
made a
back.
scene. Andre
But
stood
when something
slowly,
mattered,
not raising his
really
voice.
mattered,
He reached
moved
for his
with
blazer
quiet,
and removed his
exact
ticket from the
force.
pocket once again.
And this?
He held it up between
was
two
personal,
fingers, calm as
In
ever.
the cockpit, the captain was
I want
going
you to
over
take
flight
another look.
data when the in-flight phone rang.
But Denise didn't even
He
glance
glanced at it,
slightly puzzled.
Sir, please comply,
It was a direct
or I'll
call
be forced
from
to
ground
escalate this
operations.
further.
That almost never happened.
The younger flight
mid-flight.
attendant standing behind
He picked
her,
it up.
Ashley,
This
shifted
is Captain
uncomfortably,
Raymond.
glancing
A
at the
serious
children.
voice spoke on the other
Her
end.
voice was quiet. Captain, we have received
we
an urgent
double-check the
communication
manifest
from
again?
Mr. Kareem Rahman.
Denise shot her a
He's
sharp
listed
look.
as the co-owner of the
It's
airline
already
and has
been
identified
handled.
a misconduct issue
Passengers
involving his
in rows
wife
1 and
the
3
flight
had now
attendant
turned
named
toward the
Monica.
scene.
The
A few
captain
pulled out
straightened in
earbuds.
his seat.
Others
His
whispered,
wife is on board.
Nobody intervened.
Yes.
First
No one
class
spoke
cabin.
up.
Seat 1C.
Andre turned
He
back
has
to
asked
Caleb
for an
and
immediate
Maya.
internal check and
I'll
wants
be
Monica
right
to
back,
be brought to the cockpit.
he said
Captain
softly,
Raymond exchanged a
placing a
glance
hand
with
on
his
each of their
co-pilot.
shoulders.
Understood.
Don't worry.
I'll take care of it.
Then, without another word,
He hung up
he
and
picked up
tapped
his
the
carry-on
seatbelt
and
sign
walked
twice.
toward the back of the
In
plane.
the galley, Monica
Ashley
looked up
down
from
at
the
the
children
children
as the
clearly
chime
unsettled.
echoed overhead. But Denise only
Then,
turned
a
and
voice
voiced
over
back
the
toward the
intercom
galley
called
like it was
calmly,
just another problem.
Lead
checked
attendant
off her
Monica,
list.
please report to
She
the
didn't
cockpit.
realize it yet.
She
But
frowned.
this problem had just
That tone
changed
wasn't
everything.
casual.
Andre settled
Monica's
into the
moved her
narrow
uniform
economy
and
seat,
walked briskly
far
down
from
the
his
aisle,
children.
her heels
The
clicking
cabin
softly
felt
on the
colder
carpet.
here,
Noisier,
the passengers
less
barely
personal,
noticed, except
he
for
sat
Amina,
still for a moment,
who watched with
staring at
quiet
the back of
eyes
the
as
seat in
Monica
front of him.
passed, breathing slowly
Inside
through
the
his
cockpit,
nose. The captain
around
greeted
him,
her with a tight
passengers
shuffle
shuffled
past with backpacks and
Monica,
snacks,
please close the
oblivious to
door.
what had just happened a few
She
rows
did,
ahead.
trying to keep her
He reached into
composure.
his pocket and pulled out
We've
his
received
phone.
a serious
The screen
report.
lit up with a message from
passenger
his
in
assistant,
seat 1C,
confirming a boardroom
Mrs.
appointment
Amina
scheduled
Rahman,
for later that
was
week.
asked to stop
But Andre
breastfeeding her
ignored it.
baby.
Did that
Instead,
happen? He opened
Monica's
a new message
face
and
stiffened.
typed quickly.
Captain,
They just removed
I
me
simply
from my
followed
seat.
professional
Said my
standards.
ticket wasn't
It
valid.
was visible.
Kids are still
And
in
I
first
felt
class.
other
Passengers
He
might
hit
be
send.
uncomfortable. Seconds
I
later,
asked her
a
to be
reply
discreet
popped up.
or move.
What?
Which
The
flight?
captain didn't blink. Andre typed the flight
Did
number.
she have a
His
blanket?
jaw set.
Fingers
Yes, but
steady.
still.
Flight 684.
Did she break any
headed to
airline rule?
LAX?
Monica
pause.
hesitated. Stay put. I'll take care of
Technically,
it.
no.
Andre
The voice
locked
from
the
the
screen
speaker
and
behind
placed
the
the phone
phone
face
cut in
down on
again.
the tray table.
It was Kareem.
He wasn't worried.
Calm.
Not even close.
Ice
Cold. He had built his
She
life
is
on
my
staying
wife.
calm in chaos.
And you've just
And right
embarrassed
now
her in
he
front
had
of
no
an
entire
doubt.
cabin
This
because of your
situation was
assumptions going to unravel fast. Monica's eyes
widened.
Meanwhile, back in the first-class cabin,
I
Caleb
didn't know.
kept glancing toward the aisle.
You didn't need to know.
His face was tense.
You needed to treat her like
Maya
every other
fidgeted in her
first-class
seat.
passenger.
Her hands still
But
tucked under
instead,
the blanket their
you
father
made her
had
feel
given
ashamed for feeding her
Ashley,
child.
the younger flight
That is
attendant,
not
approached them
policy.
quietly,
That is
crouching
bias.
to their level. The line
Are
went
you both
quiet for a
okay?
second, then
She
Kareem
asked
continued.
gently.
You will
Maya
walk
nodded
back,
slowly.
apologize in front of the
Why did
passengers
that lady
and
make
escort
our
her
dad
back to her
leave?
seat if she chooses to move.
Ashley hesitated.
If not,
She-
you will stand silently. Thought there was a mistake.
When this plane lands,
but
you'll be
everything's
meeting
going to
the
be
executive
fine.
board. Do you understand?
Caleb looked her in the
Monica's
eyes.
throat went dry.
He didn't do anything
Yes,
wrong,
sir.
The
Ashley
captain didn't
nodded
know what to
slightly.
say to that. Go
Because
on,
he
then.
was right.
Fix your mistake.
In the galley,
Denise leaned
Monica
against the
stepped out of the
counter,
cockpit,
sipping coffee
face
as if nothing
pale,
had happened.
hands slightly
A
trembling.
junior attendant walked
The
by
confident
and asked
stride
if she
she always
needed
carried
anything.
through the cabin
She
had
waved him
vanished.
off. Now,
Just
each
handling
step felt
another
heavier,
seating
mix-up,
slower, like she was
happens all the
walking into a
time.
room full of eyes.
But it wasn't just
And
another
she
mix-up.
was.
Not this time.
As she moved through
And in
the
the
first
cockpit,
class
the
aisle,
captain had just
she could already
received a
sense the
priority
shift in
message from
energy.
ground control.
Some passengers
His
looked
co-pilot
up,
raised an
sensing
eyebrow
something
as
was
the screen
different.
blinked twice.
Others turned their
Looks
heads
like we're
away,
getting a call.
pretending not to notice.
It's coming from
from the corporate
Amina
operations
sat
line.
still in seat 1C.
The captain picked up the
Her
in-flight
eyes
phone
focused
and
on the
waited as the
window,
connection
one
clicked
arm
in.
around Layla,
A
who was
calm,
now sleeping
authoritative
peacefully.
voice came through. She didn't flinch when Monica stopped
"Captain,"
beside her. "We've received a
She
call
didn't
from
even look
Mr.
at her.
Andre Beckett."
Monica crouched
Passenger in
slightly,
seat 2C.
lowering her
"Yes,
voice
sir.
but making sure it could
That
still be
passenger
heard.
is the primary shareholder and
Mrs.
owner of this
Rahman,
airline.
she began,
He was just
clearing her
moved to
throat.
economy.
"I owe you a
Understood.
sincere apology.
The captain's
There has
face
been
shifted.
a
What had just
misunderstanding,
seemed like a normal
and I
flight
deeply
had
regret
suddenly
my
turned into
behavior
something
earlier.
much bigger.
I shouldn't have
Denise
asked you to
didn't
stop
notice
feeding
the
your
shift
baby.
happening just a few
And I
feet
realize
away.
now that I acted
She was too busy
inappropriately.
organizing the drink carts.
Amina slowly
humming
turned
to
her
herself
head,
as if she
her
hadn't
eyes
just
calm
humiliated
but
a father
piercing.
in front of his children.
You think it was a
To her,
misunderstanding?
it was routine.
Monica hesitated.
Sometimes people tried to sneak upgrades.
I misjudged the
Sometimes
situation.
the system glitched.
You didn't ask
She didn't
anyone else
dwell
to
on it.
move, Amina
But in the
said.
cockpit,
Her voice
the captain
soft
turned
but
away
firm.
from the in-flight
You
phone.
saw me. You
His
assumed I
expression
didn't belong. And you
He
spoke
looked at his
loud enough for
co-pilot.
everyone to hear.
That
That wasn't
man back
policy.
there.
That was
one
your
she forced
choice.
into economy.
The silence
He
in the
said
cabin
quietly.
grew thick.
He's the
Mr.
owner. Patel shifted
The co-pilot
uncomfortably in the
blinked.
seat. You're kidding. Grace looked down
Nope.
at her hands, and corporate
No
wants
one
it
fixed
fixed
immediately. Monica
Before we
nodded
even leave the
slowly,
runway,
her face flushed.
the captain flipped
You're
the
right.
intercom switch and
I was
spoke
wrong.
calmly into the speaker.
I'm very sorry.
Flight attendant
Amina
Denise,
didn't reply right
please
away.
report to the cockpit
She looked
immediately.
down at Layla, gently adjusting
Back
the
in the
blanket
galley,
over her
Denise
small
froze
chest.
mid-sip. Then
She
she
looked
looked back
up
at Monica.
confused.
It wasn't common to be
Apology
summoned like
accepted,
that before
she said
takeoff.
quietly.
She placed
But
the cup
you should
down and
remember,
smoothed her uniform.
Your tone speaks
Glancing
louder
at
than your
Ashley on her
words.
way up the aisle.
Monica stood up,
Hold the front,
humiliated,
she
and
muttered.
turned to walk back down
Ashley
the aisle.
nodded but didn't
The
look
cabin
up.
seemed longer
Inside
now.
the cockpit, she could
The
feel
moment
every
Denise
step
stepped
through
burning
the
into
door.
her
She could
skin.
feel the temperature drop.
She passed Hira
The
in the
captain
galley,
turned toward her,
who stepped
his
aside
face
to let her
unreadable
through.
but didn't say anything. Ms. Denise, the silence
He said
from her own
firmly.
crew said enough.
We've
just received
Monica
word from
returned to the
operations.
galley
like a
There's
shadow
a serious
of herself.
issue involving
Her back
passenger
slightly
Andre
hunched.
Beckett.
Her
She
expression
nodded,
tight
still not
and
understanding.
distant.
She
Yes,
stood by
I
the
had to
counter,
move him from first
gripping
class.
the edge with
There
both
was a ticket
hands as if
mismatch.
trying to steady herself.
The captain raised his hand.
The stainless steel
Number
beneath
there
her palms
wasn't. Felt ice cold.
She stopped speaking.
But not colder
The
than
man
the
you
silence
removed is
around her.
Andre Beckett.
Hira
He's
stood
the
a few
majority
feet
owner
away,
of this airline,
quietly stacking
Denise
empty
stared
glasses
at
into
him,
the drawer.
the words not registering
She didn't
for a
speak
second.
at first.
The captain
But after a few
continued.
seconds,
Her
you are
voice
to
broke
escort
the
Mr.
silence.
Beckett back to his original
You
seat
okay?
immediately. Apologize.
Monica didn't
In
answer
front of the
immediately.
cabin, in front
Her
of his
jaw was
children, and
clenched.
once we
Her
land,
eyes
you
fixed
will
on the
file
tray
a
in
written
front of her.
report with the executive board.
That was
the blood
unexpected.
drained from Denise's face. Hira looked
I-
at her for a moment.
I didn't know.
Was it? Or
That's
did
the
you just
problem.
expect no
The
one would
captain
say
cut in.
anything this time
You
either?
didn't
ask, you assumed. Monica turned her head, her
Her
voice
mouth
sharp.
opened slightly, then
What's
closed
that
again.
supposed to mean?
Fix it.
Hira didn't flinch.
He said flatly.
You've done this
Denise
before.
turned, her face
You
pale,
questioned certain
hands
passengers
trembling
more than
slightly
others.
as she reached for the
You
cockpit
watch some
door.
people like they don't belong.
She stepped back into
and
the
nobody
cabin,
says
heart
anything, so you
pounding.
keep doing it.
Passengers looked
Monica
up as
looked
she walked
away.
past.
Her
Some
fingers
with
curled
curiosity,
tighter around the
others
counter.
with suspicion.
I was just
She
following
felt
what
their
I
eyes
thought
follow
was
her
best.
all the way down
She
the
said
aisle,
finally,
heavier
her voice
with
lower
every
now.
step.
We
In the
have
back of the
standards.
plane,
Andre sat
presentation,
calmly, flipping through the
expectations.
safety card,
And that's
his
what
phone
you thought?
resting quietly
Hira
on his
asked.
tray. That a
He
mother
looked
feeding
up
her
when he
baby
saw her.
didn't meet the
Denise stopped
expectation of
beside
first
him,
class, forcing a polite smile.
Monica didn't respond.
Mr. Beckett,
She wanted to
There's
say
been a
yes,
misunderstanding. That it was about
I'd
the
like to
image,
escort you
the
back
rules,
to your seat in
the
first
comfort
class.
of other passengers.
Andre didn't
But the
move
truth
right away.
sat too heavily in her throat.
He looked at her for a
Deep
long,
down, she
silent
knew.
second.
It wasn't
Then,
about policy.
With a slow nod,
It was about
he
assumption.
stood.
The
About
silence in the
instinct.
cabin as he followed
About
her back
seeing
to the
someone
front
like
was
Amina
louder than any
and
words.
thinking
she didn't fit
As
the
Andre
picture
stepped
Monica
back
had
into
in
the
her
first
mind
class
of who
cabin,
first-class
a hush
passengers
fell
should
over
be.
the seats.
Meanwhile,
Conversations
in seat
paused.
1C, earbuds
Amina
came out and
exhaled
phones
slowly.
tilted subtly to
She
the
could
side.
still feel the tension in her
Everyone
chest.
saw what was
But
happening.
it was no longer the
and
same
more importantly,
kind.
who it was
Layla
happening
had
to.
fallen back asleep.
Caleb's face
Nestled
lit up the
peacefully
moment he
against
saw
her.
his father. Amina rested her head
Dad,
back on the seat and
he
closed
called
her
out,
eyes for a
already
moment,
unbuckling
letting
the
the soft
seatbelt.
hum of the aircraft
Andre
mask
gave
the
him a
thoughts
small
racing
nod,
through her mind.
steady and reassuring.
She hadn't planned
Maya
for
clutched
this.
her stuffed panda
She
close,
hadn't come on this
eyes
flight
wide
to prove
as
a
she
point
watched
or
her
start a
father
conversation
return.
about respect.
She didn't say anything,
But now
her
that
grip
it had
on the
happened,
toy relaxed
she
slightly.
felt something stronger
Denise,
rising
walking
just one
beside
step
her.
ahead of Andre.
Not
Looked like
anger.
someone walking toward their own
She had already
sentencing.
moved past that.
She stopped near the three seats
was
and
clarity.
turned to face him. Her
This was
posture
not just
stiff
about
and
her.
robotic. It was
The
about
words caught in
every
her
woman
throat.
who had been shamed
She
for
wasn't
feeding
used
her
to this.
child.
Not
Every
to apologize
passenger who had been
Not
judged
like this.
because of how they looked.
I
Every
apologize,
person who had sat
she
quietly,
said, forcing the
pretending
sentence
not
out
to hear,
for
not
the
to see.
inconvenience.
Her
There
phone
was an
buzzed
error
again.
on my part
She opened the
regarding your
message from
seating
Kareem.
assignment.
You handled
Andre
that
didn't
perfectly.
respond right away.
I've just finished speaking
He
to
looked
the
at her,
captain again,
calm
calm, Monica will be met by security when the flight lands. But the silence said everything. Her entire record. Ashley stood to the side, watching at the message. Her eyes flicking. There was no joy in the children. No
she looked
like she wanted to speak, just the same calm
this
strength
wasn't her
moment since the moment Monica had first raised her voice.
Her
She
voice
typed her
quieter
reply.
this time.
Don't make
It was a
personal.
mistake.
I'm
sorry for how I handled the situation.
She set the phone aside
Andre
and
nodded
looked out the
once,
window
then
once
turned to
again.
his kids.
The clouds had
Scoot
thickened
over,
below,
he said
the
gently.
city lights now hidden
Caleb
beneath a
slid toward
blanket
the
of
window,
darkness.
and Andre took his
But
seat
inside
beside
her,
them once
a
more,
quiet light had begun
adjusting
to
his
grow.
tray,
The
folding
rest
his
of the
coat
flight
neatly
moved
on his
slowly.
lap.
Like
Maya
the air
smiled up
inside
at
the
him.
cabin had
Can
thickened
we
with
watch the
unease.
movie now?
Monica didn't leave the
Yeah,
galley.
sweetheart,
She kept
he
herself
said.
busy
Go
rearranging
ahead.
cutlery that didn't need arranging
Denise
and
remained
polishing tray
standing
tables
there,
that were already
unsure
clean.
if she should say something
But her
else.
mind wasn't on the
No
task.
one told her to leave.
It was stuck on
No one
Amina's
told her
words.
to stay.
She looked
tone
around at the
speaks
other
louder
passengers,
than your words.
most of them watching with a
The
mixture
sentence
of
had
quiet
replayed in her
judgment
head
and
over
over and over like
Some
a slow,
quickly looked
steady
away when she
drum.
made eye contact.
She wanted it to stop.
Others didn't bother
She wanted
pretending.
to pretend none of this
She
had
stepped
happened.
back slowly
But
and made her way
even
toward the
own
galley.
crew wasn't
Her
pretending.
shoes didn't feel as loud
Kira
before,
spoke only when
but
necessary.
now each step
She
echoed
handled
in
the
her
rest of the
ears.
first-class
As she
service
passed
on her own.
Ashley, the younger
Politely
attendant
offering
didn't
drinks,
hide her
adjusting
expression.
seats, her eyes
Checking
narrowed
on
just
passengers.
slightly.
Her voice
Everything
was
Monica
low
was
but
supposed to be
firm.
doing. You didn't even
And
check his
Monica
name,
could
did
feel
you?
the shift. Denise
The
stopped.
quiet judgment.
She glanced at her
the
but
way
didn't
even
answer.
Kira, the junior
Ashley
crew
shook her
member,
head.
carried
You just
herself
looked
with
at
more
him
dignity than
and
she did
assumed.
now.
Denise's
In the
lips
cabin,
parted as if to
Amina
reply,
remained
but nothing came
composed.
out.
She didn't
She
act
turned
like
back
she had
toward
won
the galley
anything.
without another word.
She didn't flash a name
Back in
or demand
C2C,
special treatment.
Andre sat with
She
his
simply
hands
sat
folded,
with her child,
watching the small
reading an
screen
article
in
on
front
her
of him
phone,
without pressing play.
occasionally stroking
He
Layla's
hadn't
tiny
said
hand.
much. He hadn't needed
But everyone
to,
around her
because
noticed.
the silence
The
said
same
more than an
passengers who
outburst
had
ever
looked away
could.
earlier now watched
He
her
leaned
carefully,
back, glancing at his
some
children.
with guilt.
Caleb was
others
already
with
laughing at a
curiosity.
cartoon.
None of
Maya
them
had her
spoke to
headphones on,
but the
legs
way they
swinging
glanced at her
slightly
now,
under the seat.
it had changed.
They were fine. For now.
She was no longer invisible.
But Andre knew something had
Across
shifted.
the aisle, Mr.
And
Patel
so did
finally
everyone
leaned
else on
slightly
that
toward her
plane.
and cleared his throat. The plane hadn't even taken off
Excuse
yet.
me.
But the
He said
atmosphere of
quietly.
first class had changed
I just wanted to
completely.
say,
What was once quiet
what
and
happened
comfortable
earlier
now
shouldn't have
buzzed
happened.
with a silent tension.
That wasn't right.
Passengers avoided
Amina
each
looked
other's
up at him,
eyes, surprised for a
Some
moment,
fidgeted with their
then nodded
seatbelts.
politely. Others stared
Thank
hard
you.
at their screens,
He
pretending
opened
not
his
to think
mouth
about
to say
what just
more,
unfolded
then
in
closed
front
it.
of them.
He wasn't
Andre
sure what
sat
else to
still,
say that
arms
wouldn't sound
crossed,
hollow.
eyes on the tray in front of
So
him.
he leaned back.
He hadn't touched the
silent
welcome
again.
drink, but
His
with a
fingers
new
drummed
awareness in
lightly
his
against
eyes.
the armrest. His
Further
mind
down the
wasn't on
cabin,
the plane
Grace was
anymore.
typing something on her
It was
phone.
replaying the moment.
A message to
Denise's
her daughter,
voice,
perhaps,
her
or a
assumptions,
friend,
her refusal to
something
listen,
about what she had witnessed,
and the way she spoke
because
in front
now
of his
the
children,
story wasn't just
like he was some
Amina's.
kind of
It had
intruder in a
spread
place
into
they
every
didn't
mind
expect him
in
to
that
belong.
space.
The part
Monica's
that
words
bothered
had
him the
echoed
most
through the
wasn't
air,
what she said,
but Amina's calm
it was how
response had
confidently
settled
she
into the
said it.
hearts of the passengers.
Maya was leaning against his
Up in
shoulder
the
now,
cockpit,
relaxed.
Captain
Her
Raymond was
stuffed
on another
panda
call.
wedged between
The
them.
voice on the other end
Caleb
was
had paused his
Green's
movie and
assistant.
turned slightly,
We've
watching his
reviewed
father.
Monica's past reports.
You okay, Dad?
This isn't the
He
first
asked
time
quietly.
she's had complaints
Andre
filed
looked down
against
at him,
her.
softening for a moment.
Most of them were quietly
Yeah,
handled
bud,
at the team
I'm
level.
all right.
But there's a clear
Was she
pattern.
mad at you?
Bias
No.
related?
Andre
Captain
said with a
asked,
calm
though
that
he
didn't
already
match
knew
the
the
fire
answer.
building inside him.
Yes, all
She was
similar.
just wrong.
Minor infractions.
Caleb nodded
Judgments
slowly,
made on
not fully
instinct.
understanding,
Passengers
but sensing
who were
there was
asked
more
to
to
move
it.
or questioned
He went
unnecessarily.
back to his screen, but his
Mr.
expression
Rahman
had
wants this
changed.
addressed immediately.
Ashley approached
A full
carefully,
hearing has
holding
already
a
been
tray with
scheduled.
drinks.
The
Her
captain
voice was
nodded.
quiet,
Respectful.
understood.
Can I get you
After
anything,
the
Mr.
call
Beckett?
ended, he rubbed
Something
his
for the
forehead
kids.
and glanced out
Andre
the
looked
cockpit
up,
window.
then gave her a small nod.
The clouds were starting to
Water
clear,
for me,
and the city lights
juice
were now
for them,
twinkling
please.
far below.
Ashley
The
smiled
descent
slightly,
would begin
grateful he
soon.
wasn't lashing
In the
out at her.
galley, Monica's phone
Coming
buzzed
right
in
up.
her pocket.
As
She
she walked
checked it and
away,
saw a
Andre's
message from the
phone
airline's
vibrated
internal
again.
system.
He checked the message.
Subject: scheduled
Confirmed.
meeting.
Board has been
Disciplinary
notified.
review time.
Senior operations
Tomorrow,
monitoring your
10:30
flight
a.m.
live.
location.
Will follow up
Executive
upon
boardroom.
landing.
B
He
status
slipped the phone
required.
back into his pocket.
Her heart sank,
but not before glancing
her hands
once more
trembled
at the
as
name
she
of the
locked the
sender.
screen and slid the
Harold
phone back
Lynn,
into her pocket.
executive vice
She
president.
had been in this
Beckett
industry
Airways
for over
Group.
10 years. This
She had
wasn't
built a
over.
reputation as the
Not by a long
no-nonsense,
shot.
dependable crew lead in the galley.
But now,
Denise
none
leaned
of that
against the
mattered.
metal counter. Her
One
hands
decision,
gripping the edge so
one
tightly
moment
her
of
knuckles
assumption
turned white.
had shattered everything.
Her heart was still racing. Back in her seat still rang with the glanced at her watch. Her mind was spinning. Just under 40 minutes until landing. Thousands of passengers in her 12 years down with the airline. To Layla, whose eyes were still closed, drunk ones, even threatening ones. It's almost over, she always believed she had good instincts, but she knew she prided herself on being strict, no nonsense, professional. This flight had only uncovered professional now. Something she hoped Kareem would address not just as a husband. Ashley returned to the galley and reached into the cooler because this wasn't about one woman's mistake. She didn't say anything at first. It was about what just so many others were too used to. Her eyes avoiding Denise. And now, why didn't you scan the ticket? Had been broken. She asked finally. The plane had begun its descent, but the weight inside the cabin had not lifted. Ashley continued,
it felt heavier,
sharper this time.
Tighter.
Why didn't you just scan it like you do for everyone else?
Overhead, and
Passengers quietly clicked their
Denise
belts
muttered.
into place.
Ashley
Each one
froze
more
for a
alert
moment
now
and
than
turned
they
toward
had been
her.
the entire flight. No, the
You
tension
chose
was
not
no
to.
longer
That's
hidden.
not the same.
Everyone had
Denise
seen the
glanced
shift
at
in
her
power.
sharply.
Everyone
But
had
Ashley
heard
was
the
already
apology,
walking away,
and
tray
everyone
in
knew
hand,
something was
focused
waiting
on
at
her
the end of the
job.
runway. In the
Amina
cockpit,
sat
the
straight,
captain received
her
another
posture
ping on his
calm,
screen, her hand resting
The message
lightly
was
over
short.
Layla's small chest. Mr. Beckett
As she
is
slept
being
against
observed.
her mother's body.
Ensure he receives
Her expression
full
hadn't
protocol
changed
service.
since Monica's
Do not
apology.
leave cabin oversight.
But the silence
to Denise.
around her spoke
Management
volumes.
decision pending.
She didn't need to raise her
He
voice
leaned
or
back in his
demand
seat,
respect,
rubbing his chin.
Her presence had done enough.
Well,
she
he
checked her
muttered to
phone one
himself.
more time.
Looks
A new
like
message
this
had come in
flight
from
just became
Kareem.
a corporate problem.
Security will be at the gate.
Back in
She will
first
be
class,
escorted for formal
Ashley
questioning.
returned with the drinks.
I'll be waiting for
placing
you
them
both.
carefully on
She
the tray
stared at
table.
the words for a moment.
Thank you.
Then typed back.
Andre said softly.
Let the process speak
nodded.
louder than the punishment.
If there's anything else,
She
just
turned
let
the
me
screen
know.
off and placed the phone
He didn't
back
respond
into her
right
bag.
away. He looked at
the
her
front
for
of
a
the
second,
plane,
then
Monica
asked,
stood with her arms
"How
crossed
long have you
tightly
worked
over
for
her
this
chest,
airline?"
eyes fixed
Almost 2
forward.
years.
She
replied.
hadn't made a single step toward
Andre
the
gave her
cabin
a
since
small
the
nod.
apology.
You're doing
She
fine.
had remained in the galley,
Ashley
hoping
blinked,
to shrink into the
surprised
walls,
by the compliment,
hoping the
then gave a
landing
quiet
would come
smile
quickly
and
and the
stepped
ground
away.
would give her some sense
Quiet
of safety.
after Dad's arm.
But there was
Can
no
we watch
safety
the movie
waiting
now?
for her. Andre
Only
smiled at her,
consequences.
kissed the top of
Hira
her head
walked
and
past
handed
her
her the
with a tray.
headphones, stopped for a
Yeah,
second,
baby girl,
then
go ahead.
spoke without turning.
The plane began to taxi onto
They're
the
sending
runway.
someone to meet
the
us.
The hum of the engines
Monica
rose.
nodded once,
the seatbelt
barely
sign
audible.
dinged.
And somewhere in the
know.
back of the cabin, Denise
Do you
closed her eyes
understand
and took
why?
a deep breath. Hira asked
Because she
quietly.
knew this flight had taken a
Monica's
direction
jaw
she couldn't
moved
control
slightly.
anymore.
Yes.
And control was
Hira
something
stood
she never
silently for
expected
another
to
moment,
lose.
then continued walking. The plane lifted off
She
the
didn't say
runway with a
anything else.
smooth, steady
There was
climb.
nothing left to say.
But inside the cabin,
The damage had been
tension
done.
continued to
And
swirl
it wasn't
beneath
just
the
about
surface.
Amina or this flight.
Passengers leaned
It was
into their
about every
seats,
choice
some
Monica had
flipping
made
through
that went
magazines,
unnoticed, others
until
closing their
now.
eyes and pretending to sleep.
The captain's voice came over the
But
intercom.
even as the plane reached
Ladies
cruising
and gentlemen,
altitude,
we are now
the energy
beginning
in
our
first
final
class
descent.
hadn't settled.
Please remain seated
was
with
too
your
quiet.
seatbelts fastened.
The kind of
We'll
quiet
be on
that
the
isn't
ground
peaceful,
shortly.
just cautious.
On behalf of
Andre
our
sat
entire crew,
still.
thank you for
His body
flying with us.
relaxed, but his mind
Amina
alert.
stared out the window
He had
as the
always
lights
been
of the
measured.
city grew brighter
Always
beneath the
stayed
clouds.
calm when others lost
She had taken
control.
hundreds of flights in her
That's
life.
how he built
Long
his
haul,
business.
international,
That's how
private
he earned
charters.
respect.
But this one
But
felt
as the clouds
different.
passed
Heavier,
silently outside
more
the window,
meaningful.
a
Not
storm
because
was
of the
building
discomfort,
inside her,
but because
not
of what it had
loud, not
revealed.
reckless, but slow,
She looked down at
patient, and
Layla's
deliberate.
sleeping face. He
Soft
wasn't
and
angry for
peaceful
against
self.
her chest. He'd
Someday,
faced people like
she
Denise his
whispered,
entire life.
You'll understand
People
why I
who
didn't
smiled
let it
when you
slide.
walked in.
When
Then
the wheels
questioned
touched
whether
the
you
runway,
belonged.
there was no applause.
But watching his
no
kids
usual
witness
flurry
that,
of passengers
watching
reaching for their
Maya's
bags
face when the flight attendant
Instead,
made him get
a
up,
strange
and
stillness
Caleb's
filled the
confusion when
cabin,
no one stood up
like
to say it
everyone was waiting
wrong.
for something more than
That
just
was
the
what stayed
seatbelt
with
sign
him.
to switch off.
He leaned his head
And they
back
were
and
right to
closed
wait.
his eyes,
Because
trying
what
to
was
quiet
about
the
to
weight in his
happen
chest.
wasn't part of the
It
usual
wasn't
flight
just about one
experience.
seat.
It was
It
something
never
else
was.
entirely.
A soft voice broke
The
through.
aircraft rolled steadily toward
Excuse
the
me,
gate,
Mr. Beckett.
its tires humming
It
against
was
the
Ashley
runway
again.
as the plane slowed
She knelt
and turned.
beside his seat with a note in hand.
Inside, the cabin
This
remained
was just
unusually
handed to
quiet.
me from the cockpit.
There was no
she said
chatter about
quietly.
connecting flights.
The captain
No
thought you should
jokes
see
about
it.
bumpy landings.
Andre
No
took the
clinking
folded
of
paper.
bags being unzipped.
It was small.
The passengers
clean,
in first
airline
class sat
stationary.
stiffly in their seats.
Mr. Beckett,
eyes darting
corporate
between each
operations
other,
is monitoring
glancing
this
down
flight.
the aisle every few
Upon
seconds.
arrival, our executive
Even
team
those
will
in
be waiting
business
at the
and
gate to
economy
speak
felt
with
it.
you directly.
The shift in
We
energy,
apologize for
the
what
undercurrent
occurred,
of
and
anticipation.
assure you it will be addressed.
Something was coming.
Captain Sanders.
Amina
He
adjusted
folded the
Lila
note
carefully in
slowly
her
and
arms,
slipped it into his
patting her
pocket
back
without
gently.
a word. Ashley
The baby
stood.
stirred, but
Let me
didn't
know
wake.
if you need anything.
Amina glanced
Andre
toward the front
nodded.
of the cabin,
Thank you.
where Monica stood near the
As she
galley
walked
wall,
away,
frozen
Denise
in place.
appeared at the far end
Her
of the
once
aisle,
straight posture
pretending
was
to
gone,
check overhead bins.
shoulders slightly slumped.
She hadn't looked in
fingers
Andre's
nervously
direction
twisting
once
the
since
edge of her
his return.
uniform. She stuck
She
to her
looked like
side
she
of
was
the cabin
waiting
like
for a
it was
verdict.
marked off in
And in
invisible
many
tape.
ways,
She was.
Every time a
The
passenger
seatbelt
asked
sign
for
chimed
something,
off with a soft
she
ding.
passed it on to Ashley
instead.
Immediately, a male voice came over the intercom.
Her voice had dropped.
This time, not
Her
the
steps were
captain.
slower. Her
Ladies and
confidence,
gentlemen,
the kind
please
she
remain
carried
seated.
like a badge,
We kindly ask
was
for your
nowhere to be
patience during
seen.
deplaning, as there will be a brief
In the back
delay
of the
for
plane, the crew was
procedures.
whispering, "Thank you."
The galley buzzed
No
with
one
quiet
moved.
talk.
Heads
A
turned.
junior attendant
Everyone
named
knew
Mark
something
leaned
was
toward
about to
another and
happen.
muttered,
Then,
"You hear
the
about
aircraft
that guy
door
in the
opened.
2C?
Two men in black
other
suits
nodded.
stepped into the plane,
The owner.
followed by a
Can you
woman in a
believe she
navy
kicked him
blue
out?
blazer with the airline's
She's
executive
done,
badge pinned to her
Mark
chest.
said simply.
Their presence silenced
Even in
any
the
last
economy
bits
cabin,
of
word
movement.
was spreading.
They didn't greet
A tech
anyone.
consultant in
They
row
didn't
12
smile.
had already
They were
messaged
looking
his
for
friend.
someone. You
The
won't
lead
believe
officer
what
stepped
just
forward
happened
and
on my
spoke
flight.
firmly but calmly.
The airline owner got
Lead
kicked
flight
to the back,
attendant Monica.
then called back up.
Her name
Whole plane
echoed through the
saw it.
cabin like a dropped
But
pin in
Andre
the
wasn't
cathedral.
thinking about the
All
fallout.
eyes turned.
He was watching his
Monica
children.
took a slow breath.
Maya had
wiped
curled
her
up in
hands
her
down the
seat,
side of her
fast
skirt
asleep
and
against
stepped
his
forward.
side.
Yes,
Caleb
that's
was
me.
focused on a
The
superhero
woman in the
movie but
blazer
kept
gave her a
glancing
short
at his
nod.
dad now and then.
You'll need to come
Andre
with us.
smiled at him softly.
There's an incident under
Caleb
review.
whispered,
You've been
"She's
instructed
gonna
to
be in
report
big
for
trouble,
immediate
right?"
questioning.
Andre
Monica
hesitated,
looked around
then
for a
nodded,
second, as if she
might
might
find
find
an
escape.
Caleb
A
tilted his
reason,
head.
a defense.
"Are you gonna fire
But there
her?"
was none.
Andre
Her
looked
eyes
out the
landed
window
on
for a
Amina
moment.
briefly.
"I'm
Just
going
for
to
a
make sure she
heartbeat.
learns from it."
Amina didn't
But she was
glare.
mean.
She didn't
Caleb
smile.
said, confused.
She didn't even blink.
"I know."
She
Andre
simply looked
replied,
back at her with
"But
quiet
sometimes
calm.
people don't even know they're being
child
unfair.
like a mirror
That's
that
why we
refused
don't
to
just
crack.
punish. We teach."
Monica stepped
how
down
things
the
really
aisle,
change.
escorted by the two officers.
Caleb nodded slowly,
Passengers
chewing
leaned
on
back
the
as she
words,
passed,
trying to understand.
some looking down,
Denise
others
stood
staring
frozen
openly.
near row one,
No one said a
watching them.
word.
The
No
way
one
Andre
offered
talked to
comfort.
his kids. The quiet
As she
authority in
reached
his
the cabin
voice,
door, she
the
turned
grace
one
in
last
his
time to
presence.
glance at Hira.
She had made a mistake.
But Hira was busy helping
But
an
what was
elderly
worse,
woman unbuckle her
she was just
seatbelt,
starting to understand
acting as
how
though
big
Monica
that
had
mistake
already
really
left.
was.
And just
She
like
thought her
that,
job
she
gave
was
her
gone.
control.
The
Gave
door
her the
closed
right to
again
decide
behind
who
the
belonged
officers.
where.
A quiet exhale
But
passed
now-
through the cabin like air
Now
being
she
let out
knew
of a
she
balloon.
didn't even belong in
Still,
control of the cabin.
no one
She thought
moved.
she ruled.
Then
And
the
there were
captain's
still
voice
hours
returned.
left in the flight.
Ladies and
Hours
gentlemen,
for that
thank you
truth
for
to
your
sink in.
patience. We're now
The
cleared to
hours in
begin
the sky
deplaning.
passed slowly,
The
but
usual
for some, like
shuffle
Denise,
began.
they dragged
Bags
like a
came
sentence.
down.
She spent
Passengers
most of the
stood
flight
slowly,
hiding behind
but
busy
the
work,
energy wasn't the same.
checking tray tables
Even those
that
in the
didn't
front
need
rows
checking,
seemed more cautious,
wiping already
more
spotless
thoughtful.
counters,
As Amina
pretending
stood up
she had
with Layla
tasks
still
that
sleeping
didn't
against her
exist.
chest.
Anything
Mr.
to
Patel
avoid
stepped
the front
aside
row,
quickly to let her pass.
anything to avoid eye contact with the man
he said
whose dignity
respectfully,
she had tried to
eyes
strip
lowered.
away in front of his own children.
Amina nodded. Every
And gave
time
a
she heard
small,
laughter
polite
from
smile.
2A or 2B, she didn't need
It cut
words.
deeper.
The silence
Not
had
because
done
they
enough.
mocked her. They
As she
didn't.
walked through the
That
jet
would have been
bridge,
easier.
a man in a tailored
No.
charcoal suit
It was
was
their
waiting
peace
near
that
the
made it
end.
worse.
His presence was
Andre
strong,
hadn't raised his
unmoving,
voice,
calm,
hadn't demanded
but
anything,
unmistakably powerful.
hadn't even spoken to her
Kareem,
since
she escorted him back.
He stepped forward and took
and
him
yet
in his bag
the
gently off her
silence was
shoulder,
louder than any
kissing
confrontation
Layla's
could have
forehead
been.
as she stirred softly. Meanwhile, Ashley continued
"You
her
okay?"
duties in first
he
class
asked,
with quiet
voice low.
efficiency. She
Amina
brought
nodded.
snacks, topped off
"We're
drinks,
fine."
and checked
He
on
looked her in
Andre's
the
row
eyes,
more than anyone
searching
else.
for anything unspoken.
Not because he asked,
but all he saw was
didn't,
grace, pure
but
and
because
steady.
she felt it was the right
"I'll
thing
be
to
back
do.
soon," he said.
She had seen what happened.
"They're waiting."
And unlike Denise,
She gave him a look
couldn't
that said
unsee
more
it.
than any words could.
During one of her passes,
what's right.
Ashley
Not
paused at
just for
Andre's
us.
seat. Caleb
He
had his
nodded
headphones
once.
on again, and Maya
And
was
as she
still
walked
sleeping,
away down the
curled
hall
up
with a
with
blanket
Layla
in
in
her
her
arms.
Kareem
Ashley
turned
leaned
toward
in
the
slightly
private
and
security
spoke just
doors
loud
at the
enough
end
for
of the
Andre to
terminal.
hear.
I
Behind
know
those
it's not
doors,
my place, sir,
the real
but I
accountability
just
was
wanted
about
to say
to
I'm
begin.
really sorry for what happened earlier.
The executive boardroom
Andre
sat in
looked up at her,
silence, its
surprised
wide
for a
glass
moment.
windows overlooking
Then
the
he nodded.
runway.
You
Afternoon
didn't
light
do
poured
anything
in,
wrong.
casting long shadows
Ashley's
across the
eyes
polished
softened.
table.
But
Every
I didn't
seat
say
was
anything
taken.
either.
Legal
And I
advisors,
should have.
HR directors,
He studied her
flight
for a beat,
operations leads,
then gave a slight
and two
smile.
senior partners of the airline's
you.
board sat in
That
stillness
means something.
waiting.
No one tapped their
As she walked
pens.
away,
No one
Denise
scrolled
watched
their
from
phones.
the galley. Her
At
stomach
the head of the
turning.
table sat
The
Kareem.
shift in dynamic was
composed and
obvious.
focused. A
The
digital
crew
folder
had
opened
adjusted
in front
without
of
a
him.
word.
He hadn't
Ashley had
spoken much
quietly
since
taken
arriving.
lead of the
He didn't
first
need
class
to.
cabin,
His presence
and no
said
one
everything.
had questioned it. Not
The
even
door
the
opened
captain.
quietly, and Monica
Denise
entered,
had become a
escorted
ghost
by
on
a
her own
compliance
shift.
officer.
Present,
Her
but no
uniform
longer
looked the
trusting.
same, but
She
something
knew
in her
that when they
posture had
landed, there would
collapsed.
be questions,
The pride,
reports,
the
reviews.
certainty.
But it was
gone.
more than that.
She looked
It was the
smaller
way
now.
no one looked at her
Not
the
in
same,
size,
but in
the way
energy.
Ashley didn't even ask
Like
for
someone who had
guidance
spent the
anymore.
last hour
The way
trying
other
to
crew
calculate
members
how
stopped
far
making
they'd
eye
fallen
contact when she
and
entered
still
the
couldn't
galley.
find the bottom.
And then there was Andre.
Have
the
a
way he
seat,
sat with such
Kareem said
composure
without raising his voice.
The way he kept his
She
children
lowered
close.
herself into the leather
He
chair
wasn't
slowly.
reacting. Her eyes
He was
darting across the table, recording, never meeting anyone's gaze, letting her unravel on her own. The legal director cleared her throat and clicked her pen once before speaking. CEOs. This meeting is a formal misconduct gave them power concerning Flight 117A. Andre didn't act entitled. He acted insert under review and carried himself like someone who didn't humiliate a first-class passenger because who he was spoke for itself. During a routine feeding of her infant child. At the front of the plane, the captain received another update on the incident as described. Terminal. A message
Monica's
from
lips
corporate.
pressed together.
Mr. Beckett's legal counsel has requested
Yes.
incident footage.
I acknowledge it.
First-class cabin footage
Do you
flagged and
deny the
archived.
passenger had a
Confirm
valid
crew
first-class
status
ticket?
upon landing.
The director asked.
Ensure Ms. Denise
No,
Porter
I
is
don't
made
deny
available
that.
for immediate debrief.
Do you deny that she was
The
following
captain
all
read the
safety
message,
protocols at the time
sighed
you
through
approached
his
her?
nose and looked
No.
over at his co-pilot.
Do you deny that she was covered with
She's
a blanket
not walking
while
off
feeding her
this plane
child?
like any other day.
No.
Nope.
Kareem's voice entered the room
co-pilot
like
muttered.
a cold gust of
Not
wind.
after this.
Measured still but
Back
cutting.
in seat 2C,
Then
Andre
tell me, Monica.
finally opened his laptop.
Why her?
He didn't need to work.
Monica
But
swallowed
it gave him
hard.
something to do.
I thought something to focus on as
I
the
thought
minutes
it might
ticked by.
make others uncomfortable.
He glanced down at Maya. Did anyone
Still
complain?
sleeping peacefully with her
No,
legs
sir.
curled up.
Did you
Then
ask anyone
Caleb,
else
who
who
had
had
now
now
taken
taken
off
off his
his headphones
headphones and
and
was watching the clouds
move?
roll by?
To relocate for
Caleb
comfort?
looked over.
She shook
Are
her
we
head.
almost there?
Then I'll ask you
Almost.
again.
Andre
He
said, closing his
leaning
laptop.
forward slightly.
Few
His
more
tone
minutes.
calm but sharp.
Will they say sorry
Why
to you
her?
again when we land?
Monica's voice cracked when she
Andre's
spoke.
eyes didn't leave the
Because
window.
she didn't look like
We'll
the
see.
others. But
The
he knew
room
they
went
would.
still.
No
Not
one
because he
gasped.
demanded it.
No one needed
But
to.
because
now they had
the
no
sentence
choice.
hung
in the air like a confession.
In the back of the
soaked in
plane.
silence. Denise finally
Kareem
sat
sat
down
on the
back,
jump
his
seat.
fingers folded
Her eyes
together.
fixed on the floor.
10
her fingers
years,
fidgeting with
he
the
said
edge of her
softly.
sleeve.
You've worked for
She
this
had once
airline
believed
10 years.
experience gave her
You've been
authority.
trusted with thousands
That her
of
years in
passengers,
uniform allowed
and
her
you've
to make
made
calls
like
based
this
on
before.
instinct.
Quiet
But this
ones,
wasn't instinct.
unnoticed ones.
It was something
But
uglier.
not this
something
time.
she didn't want to name.
Monica's hands were trembling
but
slightly in
couldn't
her lap.
deny anymore. I didn't
Because
mean to.
now the entire plane
I didn't
had
know who
seen
she
what
was.
she did.
That's not the
And
point.
when the wheels touched
Kareem
down,
interrupted.
it wouldn't be
Not
buried.
with anger.
It would be
but with
waiting at the
finality.
gate. The
You
captain's
shouldn't have
voice
needed to
broke
know.
through the cabin as
You
the
should have
plane began
respected
its
her
slow
because she
descent.
was a mother, a
Ladies and
passenger,
gentlemen,
a
we've
human
begun our
being.
approach.
Not
Please
because she was
fasten your
someone's
seatbelts
wife.
and make sure your tray
He
tables are
paused.
in their upright
The
positions.
fact that she was
We'll
my
be landing
wife
shortly
just
means you picked the wrong
The usual
day to do
rustling
what
began.
you've probably done to
Passengers
others who couldn't
adjusting
fight
themselves,
back.
stowing
The legal
laptops,
director turned to
finishing
Monica.
drinks. But
As
in
of
first
this
class,
moment,
there was
you
an
are placed
edge
on
to every
unpaid
movement.
suspension pending
The
further
energy was
disciplinary
uneasy,
action.
like everyone
The
knew
review
something
board will
important
reach a
was
final
coming, but
decision
no
by
one
the end
dared
of the
to
week.
acknowledge it.
You are to
Andre
refrain from
fastened his belt,
contacting any
gently
crew,
nudging
staff,
Caleb,
or
who had
passengers
started to
regarding
drift
this
off.
incident.
Maya remained curled
Monica
against
nodded
him,
slowly,
undisturbed,
but her eyes
he
stayed
looked
down.
out the window again. She had
The
no
city
defense
lights
left.
had come into view. Tiny,
Her career
glittering
wasn't
dots
just
far
hanging by
below.
a thread.
He could
It
see
was
the runway
unraveling,
lights blinking
and she
ahead.
knew it.
And for
As
the
the first
compliance
time since the
officer stepped forward
confrontation,
to escort her
he
out,
allowed himself a
Kareem
breath of
spoke one
satisfaction.
last time.
He hadn't
Not as a
spoken a word
superior,
to Denise since being
but as a
brought
man
back.
who'd seen the
He
damage
hadn't written a
assumptions could
complaint.
cause. He hadn't called anyone
I don't
during
want
the
to see
flight.
another report like
He didn't
this
need
again.
to. From you or
His
anyone
silence
else
had
in this
done
company.
more than yelling ever
Because if
could.
it happens again,
And
I
now,
won't just fix it.
The rest was
I'll
already
rebuild
in
the
motion.
system
that allowed it.
In the galley, Denise
Monica
sat
said nothing
frozen.
as she was guided
The
out of the room.
seatbelt across her lap barely
The door
buckled.
shut softly
Her hands were
behind her,
clenched tightly
but
in
the
her
echo
lap.
of her actions
Her
remained.
eyes flicked upward every few
Kareem
seconds,
leaned back in his
waiting
chair
for the
and
final
stared at the
ding
folder
that
in
would
front
tell
of
her
him
this
for a
flight.
long moment.
This nightmare
Then he
was about
closed
to be
it.
over. The meeting
But
was
it
over.
wouldn't be over.
But the
Not
real
when
work
the
was
aircraft
just
doors
beginning.
opened. Amina sat
That's when the
alone in
real
the private
consequences
lounge
would
reserved
begin.
for airline executives and their families.
Ashley stood at the front
far
of the
from the
first-class
usual noise
cabin
of the terminal,
doing the final walk.
The
The
room
room was warm and
She
quiet,
adjusted pillows,
lined with
made
soft
sure
leather
blankets were
chairs
folded,
and tall
and
windows
gave each
that looked out
passenger a
onto the
polite
runway.
smile.
She held
When she
Layla
reached
close to
Andre,
her chest.
she paused.
Gently
If you
swaying
need
her
assistance
sides
at the
aside,
gate, she
even
said
though
gently,
the baby had long since
"Let me
fallen
know."
asleep. I'll
It
walk
wasn't
you
just
through
to soothe her
personally.
daughter. It was to
Andre
steady
shook his head
herself
with a small smile.
She hadn't cried.
I think
Not
I've got
once.
it covered.
But now, as the
Ashley
adrenaline
smiled
of the
back,
last few hours
understanding
faded,
the meaning layered
silence
beneath the
settled
calm
deeper.
response.
Not
Then
an
she
empty
moved on to the
silence,
next row,
but a heavy one.
Back in the cockpit,
One
the
filled with
captain's
reflection,
dashboard lit up with
echoes
one
of
final
Monica's
incoming
tone,
message from
the
corporate.
looks from other passengers,
Security has arrived.
the cold shame
Gate
she'd
team and
swallowed in front of
executive staff in
strangers.
position.
She looked
Ms.
down at
Denise
Layla's
Porter to be
peaceful
detained
face.
for immediate incident review.
You won't remember
The
this.
captain clicked
she
off
whispered.
the alert,
But
looked
I
toward
will.
the aisle, and exhaled.
Every second. That's
Just
it.
then the door
He
opened.
muttered. The
Kareem
wheels
stepped
touched
in
down
quietly,
with a soft
closing
thud.
it behind him.
The cabin
His tie
jolted
was
slightly,
loosened, his
and the
face
plane
calm.
slowed as it taxied
but she knew
toward
him
the
well
gate.
enough to see the weight he carried
Passengers
in his
around
shoulders.
Andre stirred.
Without
reaching for
speaking,
their
he walked
bags,
over and kissed
stretching,
Layla's forehead,
whispering.
then sat beside
But no one
Amina.
near him said a word.
"It's done?"
They all knew
she
who
asked
he was
softly.
now. They had seen
He
what
nodded.
happened.
For
In
now,
their silence,
she admitted what
it
she
wasn't
did.
ignorance anymore.
Said it out
was
loud in a
guilt.
room full of
The
executives.
seatbelt light dinged off.
Amina raised her
The
eyebrows
usual
slightly,
scramble began.
surprised,
But not like
she
it
actually
usually
admitted it. Instead of the
She
rush to
did.
stand,
he said.
there was a strange,
But only after
hesitant
it was too
stillness.
late. All
They sat in
eyes
silence
suddenly
for a
turned to
while.
Andre.
The soft
Everyone
hum of
was waiting to
ventilation
see what would happen
in the
next.
room. Andre didn't move.
She didn't know who I was.
He simply sat there,
Amina said
one
after a
hand
moment.
resting on Caleb's shoulder.
That's why she
the
thought
other
she could
gently
treat me
brushing
like that.
Maya's curls.
If she'd known
Calm,
whose name was on the tail of that plane,
as always,
she would have offered me a pillow
at the front
instead
of the
her
plane.
judgment.
The door opened, and the difference was immediate.
Kareem
Two
replied.
uniformed security
But that's
officers
exactly
stepped
the
onto
problem.
the jet bridge.
He turned
followed
toward
by
her.
a sharply dressed
What if it
man
wasn't
with a
you?
silver name badge.
What if
that
it was
read,
someone who couldn't
Director
text
of
their
Flight
husband
Operations.
mid-flight?
His
Someone
eyes
who didn't
scanned
have
the cabin
power.
with precision.
He
Amina
gave a
nodded
quick nod
slowly
to
to the captain.
That's
then
what
motioned
makes
toward
this
the
so
galley.
dangerous.
Ms.
It wasn't
Porter,
just me
she
she
called out.
humiliated.
Denise
It's
stood
every woman
slowly,
who's ever
her
been
knees
told to
stiff,
shrink herself
her
for
face
someone
pale.
else's comfort.
Yes.
Kareem
You'll
reached
need
into
to
his
step
jacket
off
and
with us
pulled out a
now.
notepad with scribbled
Passengers
notes on
gasped.
airline policy
Some
reform.
pretended not to look, but
I
their
want to
eyes
do
followed
more
her
than
every
just
step.
suspend her.
Others glanced
want
at
this
Andre and
moment
then
to
back
mean
to the
something.
front. No one said a
Mandatory
word.
bias training isn't
Ashley,
enough.
now
I
standing near
want
the
clear
door,
protections.
stepped aside.
I want
Denise tried to
procedures
keep
where
her
no one
posture
gets
straight,
questioned
but her
based
hands
on
were
appearance.
trembling.
She
I
didn't
want public
speak.
reporting
She didn't
channels.
argue.
She simply
And I
followed
wanted
them
in
off the
writing that
plane.
mothers have
Each
full
step
rights
heavier
to
than
feed
the
their
last.
children wherever they
As she
sit.
passed Andre's row,
Amina
she
looked at the
risked
paper,
one glance
her
in his
eyes
direction.
scanning the lines.
But he didn't look back.
All of this,
He was helping
he
Maya
nodded,
sit up, whispering
and
something
more.
to Caleb,
This
brushing a
won't be
wrinkle out
handled
of his
quietly,
daughter's
Amina.
sleeve.
I want the
His
message
focus
loud
was
enough that
exactly
no one
where it
else
had been
thinks
from
about
the
making
start,
a woman feel
on
the
his
way
kids.
Monica made you feel.
And that quiet dismissal
Amina
hit harder
exhaled,
than any
her eyes
confrontation
softening.
ever could.
Good. Because I'm
Denise
tired of
stepped
being
off the
asked
plane
to stay
and
into the
silent
terminal,
just to keep things
the
comfortable.
doors hissing shut behind her.
Kareem looked at her with pride.
Back in the cabin,
the kind of
passengers
pride that
slowly
didn't
began
come
to
from love
stand.
alone. Some
But from
glanced at
deep
Andre
respect.
with newfound
You
recognition.
didn't raise your voice.
A few
he
nodded
said.
subtly,
But somehow
one man
you were
offered
louder
a quiet
than anyone
"sir"
else on
as
that
he
plane.
passed by. Eyes low,
She gave him a
voice
tired
respectful.
smile.
Ashley
Sometimes
returned to Andre's
silence
row
carries
and
more
crouched
weight than
slightly
shouting
to meet
ever
his
could.
eye. Would
He
you
reached
like
over
me
and
to
took
help
her
you
hand,
off?
lacing their
Andre
fingers
stood,
together.
scooping up Maya's
Outside
bag
the
and
window,
handing Caleb
a new
his.
plane was lifting
"No,
off into
thank
the
you,"
sky.
he said gently.
Inside,
"We're good."
something else had taken
He
flight.
took one child's
An
hand in each
unspoken
of his
promise
and stepped
between
into
them
the
that
aisle.
this wouldn't just
The first-class
be a memory.
cabin parted for them without
It would
a
be
word.
the beginning of something
And as
bigger.
they walked forward, something
Calm,
lasting,
steady,
and silent,
something that would
every
stretch
person
far
on that
beyond
plane
one
knew
flight,
what had just
one
happened
seat,
wasn't about
one
one
woman.
seat. It was about
And
every
Amina
time
knew
someone like Denise thought
that
they had
was
the
the
power
real
to decide
victory.
who belonged. And this
Later
time,
that evening, the corporate
they chose the wrong
communications
man.
team gathered in a
The
small
terminal
media
was
room
unusually
tucked inside
quiet
the
for that
headquarters.
time of day.
But
Emails
the
had
silence
already
had nothing
started
to do
flooding
with
in.
flight
schedules.
Some from
It was
passengers
the
who
kind
had
of
been on
silence
flight
that follows
117A.
The heavy
Others from
pause
people
after a
online
wave had crashed
who
down
had
and
caught
changed
wind
the
of the
shoreline
story
forever.
through whispers on
A
forums
few airline
and social
staff
media
near the gate
leaks.
kept their eyes
A
fixed
few
on the jet
passengers
bridge,
had already posted
standing
vague
straighter
but
than
pointed
usual.
statements.
They had
Saw
received the
something
memo.
disgusting on my
Executives
flight
were
today.
arriving.
Staff treating a mother
passenger
like a
had been
problem.
wronged.
Totally
And not just any
unacceptable.
passenger.
Another one had written,
Andre stepped off the
"What
plane
century
with his
are we
children
in
at
where
his
feeding a
side,
baby in
holding
first
one in
class
each
causes
hand.
a scene?" His pace was
Kareem
steady,
sat at the far
unhurried,
end of the table,
his expression
listening
calm
as the head
but
of
unreadable.
PR. A woman
He
named
wasn't looking for an
Marwa
audience,
outlined the growing
but
pressure.
the terminal gave him one
"We have
anyway.
less than 12 hours
Gate
before
agents
someone
froze.
connects the dots." A
And
ground
this goes
staff
public in a real
supervisor
way,
adjusted her
she
badge
said,
and nodded
adjusting
in
her
quiet
glasses.
acknowledgement.
The right thing to do is
Uniformed
take control
security
of the
held back a
narrative
few
before
curious
someone else
onlookers.
does.
The
We
man from
issue a statement
operations,
tonight.
the one who had removed Denise,
Kareem nodded.
stepped forward to
"We're
greet
not
Andre.
writing a defense.
"We're not
Mr.
protecting
Beckett,"
the company," he said.
We're
offering
acknowledging
a
a
hand with
failure,
both respect
and we're
and
setting
caution.
a new standard.
"Welcome
I
home.
want names out of it,
If
but
you'd
not
allow us, we have a
responsibility."
private lounge prepared for you
Marwa
and your
opened her
children while the
laptop and
review
read aloud a
begins."
draft statement.
Andre looked at Caleb.
Today,
Then at